okay, as you can see, we've moved on quite a big step from the last one. All we've basically done, bring it up to speed, all the sub-assemblies were put in as you saw, and all we've actually done now, two halves together, sandwiching the engine in the back, and then away we go. And all we've done, used a bit of Mr. Surfacer to take care of those seams, top and bottom like that, very straightforward. The engine was just put in as you would do normally, obviously with the tail off. Now, to tell you the truth, what I actually did, I dropped it, smashed down, smashed the engine into 3 bits, ripped this part off the back completely off, and all the rest of it, so I've had to redo it. So obviously with the editing and the bits and pieces, I wanted to show you sort of it in real time, so without showing you in hundreds of bits, because there's not a lot of point, but this is where we're to, we've brought it back up. So we've also done the tail as well, and as you can see, we put in a former basically showing the detail and put some holes in it, and eventually we'll put some wiring in there and things like that, so it'll go together. So how did we do that? Obviously we chopped it off, tail goes together, you're just left with the open hole. To do it, all we did, got some plastic card, this is 1mm thick plastic card, okay, then all you do, pop the tail onto it, just like that, okay, and with a biro, just pop round it all. Just like so. There we go. Just round it completely like that. And then for the engine section, all I used was pop one of my bottles just down there, which gives us our rough size of how the engine is. Obviously we cut it out, basically pretty straightforward, and then all we did was put it onto it. Now the thing is, put it onto it, hold it down, extra thin all the way around it, and glue it on, leave it about half an hour to dry. Okay, so then you'll end up with something like this, and it will be oversized, and you want it to be oversized because then you can go round and cut it to clean it up. So all we do, get your scissors or a file and go round and give it a good cut up. So if I use just some smaller scissors because I can get in closer with these, all we do is literally just popping round it and getting close in without going right up to the plastic. But as you can see, just getting in there just like so. As you can imagine, just around like that. Coarse file to start with, and then we just blend it in to the body. Okay, have a feel, make sure you're not getting sanding in too close, and then the closer you get, when you're basically where it's flush, like there, what I do then is switch down to different grades of finer files to get it in, so you can polish it in without making big scratches into the plastic. Because obviously if you make big scratches into plastic, they are going to be a bit of a pain to get rid of. And then eventually, once you've done all that, you go round and it's nice and smooth and it's completely tapered in just with the end of it. Then all I've done with these is looking at a few reference photos we've got of it. I've actually just put some holes in and all the rest of it. Now this back part, obviously we've got this tab system we spoke about before, goes in, so we've made a little slot. So then what will happen is, I'll just show you roughly what we're getting. I'm being a bit careful with this because it's still a little bit wet. And then we just slot them in like so, and then hopefully it goes in and gives us your section just like that, and then by the time they're both blended in, they're absolutely fine. And there we go, it takes the weight quite well, but we're going to put a few little pins made of plastic card in there, so it really takes the weight a lot better. So we can show it with engine open or closed. So what we do, and just very carefully take the tail off, obviously revealing that engine, and we can see the blades down inside just like that. So there we go. I know I've moved on a little bit, but it's very straightforward, and sanding and filling, there's other bits on the site you can see about that for actually doing that, and I'll add that to the DVD as well. So there we go, that's those bits done. At the same time, obviously whilst everything was drying and everything else, I've gone round and cleaned up all the parts for the wing. Obviously this is leading edge slats here, so we've cleaned them up, nicely sanded them off and flushed them off. Now the thing is, at the back area, of a lot of these parts. It's quite thick, and you get like a gap. It sandwiches together with a hollow. So I've run some filler in there, and we sanded and filled the backs of those as well to make them a very nice join. So we've done those just like that. Same with all the other bits. So we've got a lot of the sub-assemblies all together now. So what we'll do, we'll just let this dry off a little bit more, get this back part sanded up, and we can show you some drilling for the holes to make it a nice fit to go. We'll do a little bit of detailing work then we can get this tail half together and forget about it for the minute, and we can move on with the build. The build itself goes together very, very fast at this stage, because obviously it's just sub-assemblies that have all gone together. Now we've got to detail the engine. We're going to have various panels open, so obviously for the hydraulic ram like here, for the emergency power one, the gear, the things like that. The other thing I've done is I've sprayed white down the air intake, as you can see it probably just down there. If you can. Now there's 2 ejector pin marks inside of the mouth, and they're horrible to get to. Well worth doing them first. I didn't, unfortunately. I forgot, didn't see them, put them in, and away we go. The seam lines from the other one, by using a bit of Mr. Surfacer and everything else, have made a fair good job down there. But what I've actually done is gone around and give it a couple of coats of some XF2 white, tipped in there, swirled it round, left it a day or 2 to totally dry off, did another day or 2 to dry off, and get to it like that. So hopefully it's filled up all those gaps quite nicely. And then as a finishing off thing, all I've done is airbrushed it neat down into the intake. Now it's still a little bit tacky now because I did it this morning. What I'm going to do, let that dry for the next sort of about 24 hours, and then I'm going to tip some more Johnson's Clear or your Future down into that, and then let that totally tip out, and hopefully it'll give us a nice glossy intake. And what we can do, we're going to bung it up for a bit, stop any dust and resin and horrible bits going down there. So that's those bits done. So we'll just get this back part cleaned up. Alright, so we've got this basically all together now. The fuselage section's done. Plastic arms put on the back, as we said, we've sanded it flash all around there. Put some little holes in, very simple. If you haven't got various size drill bits, a way to do it is you just put the hole in using a pin vise, something like this, and then literally just I use a square one, but you can use a file. Just put it in and go around, and then all you do is mark on the file how far you've gone in, and that'll give you different size holes. But basically, if we just bring you in a little bit, you can see we've actually got round the back here. We've put the holes in, which will hopefully gives us a bit of a detail between the two. Now we've got some wiring to go in there as well, but these things can be done afterwards, because what we need to do is obviously spray up these areas to get them to all look nice. But as you can see, it gives an overall effect that we're after. We can still see the top of the engine, and from this side inwards we can see some of the fan blades going on in there as well. So what we've got, these areas to still detail up with, using washes, perhaps a little bit of wire, but a lot of dry brushing, things like that. Obviously with this area at the top of the engine up here, the wheel wells, things like that, you see I've pre-shaded a little bit as I had some grey around as I was doing some of the priming. But certainly with the other areas we're going to do is the gun bay, things like that, and a little bit of work around the cockpit still. Now the cockpit itself is literally just going to fit up the top here. Get it on. We'll go on just up here with all the bits, but it's one of those things can be really last bits in as we build over it. We can do all the other areas first. So what we can actually do for the minute is close up the engine section. So we'll just bring these two together. So what we're going to do, because we've cut in those slits on the side here, we can just bring them up, cover over, make sure both halves are in. That's the secret with this. Okay, and there we go, and we give a little bit of a push, and the engine section's in, just like that. So what we can do, we can leave that for the moment as is, and we'll come back and detail it afterwards. But what we're going to do for the moment, we're going to carry on with the rest of the build, getting those areas together. Then what we're going to do is do this in sort of subsections still. So what we're going to do, we're going to sort out the wing areas, which we've done. They're all ready to go here, just like this. So we can have a quick sort of test bit. Obviously we're going to have this somewhat showing in the up position, which will give us this type of effect with it. But obviously we can look at detailing perhaps some of these areas. They're not too bad for these wing joint parts, I must admit. They're very, very nice. They're just going to get the right side on. They actually do lock in there very well on their own without actually having to be fitted. But it's a nice little area. Perhaps we can pop in a little bit of fuse wire in there just to liven up those bits and give your eye something else to see. But generally they are very good. They sit in there. So what you could do is have it of the wing up and down, because it's a nice fit. You know, to be honest, it's a nice strong fit. So they're okay. But what we can do now, we can go back to our instructions. He says, I haven't used them for a while, and basically we're going to go through some of the more steps on here. Obviously we're not going to worry about covering things up, but what we can do is certainly we can start to paint up some of the areas and really bringing this one together now. Okay, so you can see we've actually got the interim panel fitted in. Now, as I say, it's not the perfect type of thing. There's obviously resin aftermarket things to go inside this one, but as you can see, it's not too bad. It's just a little bit sort of basic for sort of a 132 really. I suppose at the end of the day I was hoping you'd get such more, you know, sort of hosing, instruments and things like that. And because there's no real dials on this one either, it does make it for quite a sort of strange fit. What you could do is get something like Reheat, do some dials. And I have got some of those here somewhere. Which are these, which are very, very nice. So basically what you've got here is they're printed decal instrument panels, which are quite good because you can use them as a decal if you wanted to, cut them out and then stick them in, or certainly what you can do is just punch them out, place them behind a piece of acetate and things and do it like that. So it's totally whichever way you want to do it. But these are the Reheat ones. Very handy to have just lying around, or if not, go through your spares box, and many a time you sort of have leftover instrument panels and you can put them in. Because I'm going to do this one sort of closed down in the cockpit area, I'm not very worried about it. The other thing that's sort of missing is a heads-up display. Some type of gun HUD up here would have been handy, but you don't get one of those either. So what we're going to do is add those, just a little piece of acetate down, and we'll paint them up, but I'll show you that bit in a minute before we put the glasswork on. Now normally what I tend to do is, if you follow all these other builds, is that we normally sort of build the entire thing, and wheel wells and that we close up and spray them, so they will be all done, and then obviously we just unmask them, undo them, fit the gear, and away we go. Because these are such big areas, and quite frankly they're nice and square, certainly some undercarriage things like that, and we've still got to do some work on this back engine here. What I'm going to do with this one is leave them unexposed, and then what we'll do, we can mask up the white area around them afterwards and spray them in and take care of them as individuals, and it's a bit easier, especially this bit of area at the top here. We can do that sort of afterwards. So it's just a different way of doing it. I know a lot of people do it that way as standard. I tend to do it the other way, but for something on a big one like this, we're going to do it afterwards. That way we can treat each one as an individual. For instance, these bays here are green, so we can just mask up around it, spray it inside, remove it, and there we are, we're all done. Same with these, but obviously the wheel wells, they're going to be white, which can go white at the same time as you do the rest. So we take a sort of side step from the instructions. So what we're actually going to do here, we're going to place in some of the bits that are asked for, which are in stages 16. So we can place these in there. You make sure these go around the right way. But these are going to go in just like so. So we can place those in, use a little bit of glue, and you just tap them in at the top, like so. Okay, so we're to this stage now where we've taken care of all the seams and we've rescribed all the little lines in, everything else like that, so we can really start bringing it together. Now normally what I would do is I'll detail all these areas, paint them up perhaps white or green for gun bays, white for wells, things like that, and then we'll actually go around and put obviously all the bits, details in there. Spray white, obviously inside of gear doors, things like that, and then tack them in place with a little bit of Play-Doh or blue tack, something like that, white tack on there. And then what we actually do then is spray the entire thing afterwards. But on this particular one, because they're nice and big, the bays and things like that in 1/32, and they're easy to mask because they're pretty square, it's not like we're doing complex curves and things, and like down here, what we can actually do is do them afterwards. So I'm not going to worry too much about any of these bays at the moment. We'll mask them after we've painted to mask up the actual aircraft's colour, and we can paint them afterwards. So things like this we can take as a separate, spray it, detail it, wash it, dry brush it, things like that. Same with the gear, and not have to worry. And the same will go for the engine as well. We can actually then paint this up, give it some more weathering and final details of the wiring and stuff like that before we're ready for final assembly. So what we need to do now is just put on any parts that we're going to need to afterwards. So underneath here we've got hold of the various components and bays, so these can start to go together. So what we need to do is just get these in. It'll take some sanding and filling, but these small ones can go on here. Then we've got another one that's going to fit in here, like this. And then what we've actually got is the main gear well, which will fit down over the top like that. So we can get all those glued in all ready, and then we can go around and paint them up as we need to do. The other thing as well we're looking at, that if you're going to be looking at number 16 on your instructions is obviously this long strake that goes down underneath the fuselage, underneath the belly, that's going to fit in something like this underneath. Basically, there's a panel line just down the back here. We can actually cut it on this panel line with a razor saw and then glue, and then obviously you'll have half will go onto the actual tail itself, the big one to go down here, and the back end will go to the tail area just on like here. So that way it will give us the nice join, so obviously when the two parts are apart or they're together, it will look as one. The other thing we've got as well is the clear parts. We were just looking at the canopy because obviously we've got the front windscreen in and things like that. So as I do with these things, I always do a test bit, so we put the large part on the back first, just like that. I just clear these out of the way a bit. And then what we can do is that we've got that one on, we're happy, that's a nice fit to the rear, it's a nice width and things like that, and then we can test the front part. Now we've got a gap at the front, so obviously we don't want the gap down here so much, we would rather have it towards the back to make a nice join across here. So what we have to do is take care of a little bit of filler just around the front, but that's something that can come afterwards. So obviously on the website there's various tutorials about masking up, but if not, what we can do is just put some Tamiya tape around this to have it as a mask to protect it, and then we can actually then dry fit it on here, make sure we're all happy, put the internals in because there's some internal bars that go onto this one in there, and then those can go on just like that, and then we can get on with doing some painting. Okay, so what we've got here is some 6mm Tamiya tape. And we're just going to mask up the actual clear parts. Now there's two rings round this. There's like a yellowy bar that goes round, which is I think the sealer between the two. So what we've got here is some 6mm, and because at this scale we should be able to do this by crimping and not cutting. So what we do, we just lay it up to that bottom one. We go up to our corner we particularly want, and then if we just bend it round, we hopefully we'll get the correct sort of curve that we're after, something like that. So there we go, if we just bring you in. So there we go, it gives us that type of curve to it. So what we can do now, we can just move these out of the way. We should be able to just carry it around. So what we're doing is actually pulling and bending at the same time to give us our curve, and we're just following it right the way around. So we come down to the bottom one again, we go halfway across and we just place our nail, and then we curve it up slightly and we just bring it in, move the nail down a little bit more, and we give it a bit of a push, and this gives us our, bit of glare there, our second curve as we wake our way round. So we just do the lower ridge along here. Same thing. Now obviously you could cut this. This is just a slightly cheeky way of doing it, I suppose, but it's a quicker way and it saves a lot of trimming required. So we just carry on moving right down here. So then we just give that a crimp. And there we go, that gives us our lead. So what we can actually do here, we'll just crimp that up and over. And then we've got some other thicker bits here. So we can just stick these over here. And just bring them over the top. I've got some decoupage scissors which are lovely for cutting tape because they're nice and sharp. Just like that, we've got this other spare bit here. And these spare bits. Just on one tiny little bit on the top there. There we go, that one's all masked up, so obviously from the inside we're like this. Now on this type of scale we've got other bars to go in, but what we need to do is just protect that clear part. So that one's done. The other one, if you've seen me do it before, there's two ways to do this. Either do it exactly the same as the other way. You could use some very thin tape, which I'll show you now. So here we've got some 1mm. So if I just show you how I do these with a bit of 1mm. just cut the end off so we've got a fresh part. So obviously it's a square part to the front of these, so actually what we'll do is we'll just go past it a little bit, and then using the thinner tape, so there's a bend just here. So we can just get these in, and what we need to do is just get it to ride up a little bit. Up to the top, where we just cut that like that. We'll cut this off down here. What we can do, we can trim these up afterwards. So then this one is going to go right to the top, like so, and we just follow it down. And because it's very thin, it's very bendy, and does the trick. Just like that. Then we just take our knife. What we'll do, we'll just give that a cut. Like that one. These two just down here. There we go, and then you can just fill it in just like that. So really there's two ways of doing it. There's no real right way to it. It just depends on which way you're happy doing. The other way, I prefer this particular way, probably because it just works out a little bit cheaper. The other way you can do it, which I can show you, is if you take a large piece of 40mm Tamiya tape, which is the really wide stuff that doesn't come in a dispenser, which looks like this. So you get yourself a piece like this. If we just bring it out a little bit, then all you do is actually, you can either pick the straightest edge to this and put it on, or you can do what I'll do here. You just put it right the way over the entire flat area that you're going to do. Okay, push it nicely firmly down, remembering not to crack your glasswork because it is a bit thin. Then if you hold this up to a light, you can see through it and then cut out the pattern. So if you give me a minute, so then you just carefully peel it off, and there we go, it's done in one instead of two like that. So really there's either way you want to do it. Some ways using the thin tape is a lot better, you can see where you're going. Obviously when you're putting on a big bit like that, you have to be careful a little bit. There we go, that's those masked up. We'll just fill in this area, and then we can put on a small little HUD we're going to put on here. So in the meantime, what we need to do, we need something for that to look good again. So we've got a bit of green here, flat green. I can get the top off, a bit of trouble getting the top off. Little tip, if you can't get your top of your paint off, all you do is stick a bit of putty to it like this, and then give it a go. If that doesn't work, stick her in some warm water, and that normally gives the go. So just wrap it around the top, and it just gives you something extra to grip to without burning your fingers off. There we go. Very old, very thick one this. Must buy a new one. Oh, we've lost the top. Good. Covered in green. Right, so what we do, we just get a, you can use a cotton, a cocktail stick or a sort of toothpick. So what we do, we just snip the end off, a bit more blunt. So we just grab a blob of it, just want a little ball, and then we come over and we're just going to pop this just down, just like that. As you can see, there it is, just there, just to give it that sort of green look, just like so. We'll give that 10 minutes just to dry off, and then what we'll do, we'll cut a small piece of acetate, clear plastic, just to add as a little HUD for there for us, to give us a nicer look. But there's that bit on there like that. Then what we're going to do, we're going to dry brush this entire area up, just to give it a little bit of depth.